Hello friends, I had thought that just one video will be enough to support what the real history says. Last time I told you about what our mainstream historians have talked about, but the irony is that I have more than 30 sources and it's very difficult for me to eliminate most of them. Only some are there where repetition is there. Still, I have uh, identified 10 of them, maybe 11, starting with the simplest one. The list I have already provided you in the beginning. Max Muller, he has given one para only, that astronomy was also studied. Aryabhat the elder had described the earth as making a revolution which produced the daily rising and setting of the sun. Professor Muller thinks he had no predecessors. Varahamihir wrote during the reign of Vikramaditya and employed yoga in opposition to the Shak era. Varahamihir giving the actual Greek name in a Sanskrit dress. Actually, this is a commentary to the book by Max Muller, commentary of Wilder Alexander. These words are there in the commentary. Means at that time also, Max Muller agreed that astronomy was there. He didn't give much details about. Then Albrecht Weber, he says, astronomical observations, though at first, of course, these were only of the rudest description, were necessarily required for the regulation of the solemn sacrifices, in the first place of those offered in the morning and evening, and then of those at the new and the full moon, and finally of those at the commencement of each of these three sessions. At various times in the days or paksh or full moon, or these ceremonies were required, and for which accuracy of timing was very essential. The later portion of Vajsani Samhita and in the Chandogya Upanishad express mention made of observers of the stars and the science of astronomy, and in particular the knowledge of the 27 or 28 lunar mention was early diffused. They are enumerated singly in the Taittiriya Samhita, and the order in which they occur is one that must necessarily have been established somewhere between 1472, 1472 and 536 BC. Means all this must have been established before the Christ, rather much before the Christ. So the influence of Greece, I don't know how they arrive at. Then we have the sacred writings of the Hindus, and 1805 means 217 or 18 years before present. To each Veda, a treatise under the title of Jyotish is annexed, which explains the adjustment of the calendar for the purpose of fixing the proper period for the performance of religious duties. It is adapted to the comparison of solar and lunar time, and was evidently formed in the infancy of astronomical knowledge. From the rules delivered in the treatise, which the author has examined, it appears that the month is lunar, but the end and in the middle of the consequential period, an intercalation is admitted by doubling 1 month. So 1 month is added, that we call Mal Mas as the 13th month. That means that has been there right from our Vedic times. And how old is our Panchang? Nobody knows about. Ever since we started celebrating Kumbh, we don't know. How long we have been talking about Surya Grahan and Chandra Grahan? It is, they say it is that time, but what is the exact time? And can you compare that time with NASA? NASA can emulate us. Then the year is divided into 6 seasons and each month into half months. In English we have fortnight, 2 weeks. In our calendar it was Paksh, ascending moon and descending moon. Depending on that, we had the Shukla Paksh and Krishna Paksh, and there were 6 seasons. How many of you can actually count and name those 6 seasons? I doubt. I don't think there would be many. The ancient Hindu calendar, corresponding in its divisions of time and in the assigned origin of the ecliptic with several passages of the Vedas, is evidently the foundation of that which, after successive corrections, is now received by Hindus throughout India. And then a lot many things have been said, and then the various constellations which are there, nakshatras which are there, have been described. Then we have with us, this is Mrs. Manning. Mrs. Manning says, when the people think the sun is set, it is not so. For after having arrived at the end of the day, it makes itself produce two opposite effects, making night to what is below and day to what is on the other side. Again, it's talking about that very time only. We knew how days and nights are set through the motion of the earth. And these people say that science evolved only after, in 16th century, when we learned that earth revolves around sun. In the 32nd Hyman of the second book of Rig Veda and in the Brahmanas, there are legends describing the constellations. She then describes them. These passages indicate that the new moon and full moons were closely watched, which is also evident from the mention of a 13th month. Again, the repetition of the same means our ancestors, sages, they must have spent days, weeks, months, and years together watching the stars, the sun, and the moon, because there was no mechanical devices, electronic devices, and still they are as accurate, maybe more accurate in certain things than our science is developed today. Then very interesting thing is there, the moon was the measurer. Time was measured by nights and moons and winters, long before it was reckoned by days and suns and the years. The close connection between the names of moon and month makes it probable that a certain knowledge of lunar chronology existed even before the separation of Indo-European family. That is her view, and that can be contested if you want. Then more elaborate details are given by Hunter, Indian Empire. It says, the astronomy of Brahmins has formed alternatively the subject of excessive admiration and of misplaced contempt. The truth is that they are these periods of Sanskrit astronomy, Jyotish Shastra. The first period belongs to Vedic times and has left a moderate store of independent observations and inferences worked out by Brahmins. The Vedic period has arrived out of a tolerably correct calculation of solar year, which they divided into 300 years with an intercalary month every 5 years. They were also acquainted with the phases of moon. They divided her pathway through the heavens into 27 or 28 lunar mansions and had made observations of a few fixed stars. The order of which the lunar mansions are enumerated is one which must have been established somewhere between 1472 and 536 BC, as quoted by Weber. The same is there. The planets also had an independent, although a later discovery, bordering on the Vedic period. At first 7, afterwards 9 in number, they bear the names of Indian origin and the generic terms for planet Grah. The Caesar has its source in the primitive Sanskrit astrology. These 7 stars previously, which are named based on Sanskrit, and your historians say that we have borrowed these names from Greeks. Now, if we stop here and talk about the Greeks, I have already told you about India in Greece, Pocock's book, where he says that there are at least 1200 words in the Greek language that do not owe their origin to that land but to India. In one of the videos I have already told you, even the word Greece, it is derived from Grihakos. Rajgrah was the capital of Magad, and people were called Grihas. From here went there Grihas, Grihakos, Greece. Similarly, Magad, Macedonia. There are many more such words, and for that we can take the help of Louis Jacoliot. He wrote in 1870 the Bible in India. Previously, again, I have said in a video that he had come to explore the existence of Jesus in India because he was lost for about 12 years. But he became Krishna Bhakt, and he has written that book, and he tells us. Here are a few from Sanskrit by way of proof if we would know the origin of all names of Greek fables and mythology. He has given a long list, but still that list is brief. Like Hercules, it is derived from Harkala. Harkala Sanskrit, the name of Shiva, the god of battles and Hindu poetry. Theseus, in Sanskrit, Thasaha, the associate companion of Shiva. Icus, a judge in hell in Greek mythology. In Sanskrit, Ahaka, a severe judge, adjective of qualification, ordinarily attached to the name of Yam, the Hindu judge of hell. Arion, the unhappy princess abandoned by Theseus and who had committed the fault of giving herself up to the enemy of family. In Sanskrit, Ariana, seduced by an enemy. Radha Mantas, another judge in the hell. In mythology, in Sanskrit, Radha Manta, who chastises crimes. Andromeda, sacrificed to Neptune and succored by Perseus. In Sanskrit, Andharamedha, sacrificed to the passion of the water god. Perseus, in Sanskrit, Parasaha, timely succor. Orestes, celebrated for his madness. In Sanskrit, Orakasata, devoted to misfortune. Pylades, a friend of Orestes. In Sanskrit, Pulada, who consoles by his friendship. Centaur, mythological half man, half horse. In Sanskrit, Cantora, man horse. Jupiter, in Sanskrit, Zeupitri, father of heaven, or Zeupitri, of which the Greeks have made the word Zeus and the Hebrews Jehovah. Pallas, the goddess of wisdom. In Sanskrit, Pallas, protecting wisdom. Again, this Pallas, it has been called by these historians as we have borrowed from Greece. Athena, the Greek goddess of chastity, in Sanskrit, Atenaya, without children. Minerva, who is the same goddess with Romans but with the added attribute of courage. In Sanskrit, Ma Narava, who supports the strong. Bellona, goddess of war. In Sanskrit, Balana, warlike strength. Neptune, in Sanskrit, Na Patana, who governs the furious waves. N number of them are there. Pluto, the god of hell. In Sanskrit, Palushta, who strikes with fire. The Hellenes, in Sanskrit, Helena, warriors, worshippers of moon. Does not Greece also have the Helenas? N number of names are there. Pythagoras, in Sanskrit, Pythaguru, the schoolmaster. So Pythagoras, it was a title, it was the name of the person, and I have already shown previously that Pythagoras, he had his education from Indian sages. Anaxagoras, in Sanskrit, Anangaguru, the spirit master. Protagoras, Prataguru, the master distinguished in all sciences. And again, if we pass from Greece into Italy, Gaur, Germany, Scandinavia, we find the same Sanskrit origin. The Italians, from Italus, son of Trojan hero, in Sanskrit, Itala, man of low caste. The Brethil, Bharata, people of the artisan caste. The Sabines, Sabana, the warrior caste. Samnites, Samanata, the banished. Celtis, Kalata, the invading chiefs. The Gauls, Galata, people who conquer as they march. The Belge, Balaja, children of the strong. The Siquanas, Sakana, superior warriors. Sucambare, Sucambiri, good lords of the land. Scandinavians, Skandinava, worshippers of Skand, the god of battles. The Swede, Suyodha, good soldiers. Norway, Naravaja, the country of marines, who or men of the sea. The Baltic, Balataka, sea of the powerful conquerors. The Moldavians, Moldava, people of the lower caste. The Valaku, in Sanskrit Valaka, the servile class. The Alamani, German, Alamano, freemen. Ireland, Arran, rock surrounded with salt water. Thane, ancient Scottish chief. Thana, chief of warriors. Then many other names from Asia and neighboring areas. Most important are two: Mesopotamia, Madhyapotama, country between rivers. There are two rivers surrounding Mesopotamia. And finally, Zoroaster, who brought sun worship into Asia. Sanskrit, Suryastara, who teaches sun worship. So all these names plus many more were learnt by Greece and other countries surrounding them. And these historians, I am surprised that if I can have access to all these sources, why didn't they try even? I'm pretty sure they do not know about. Anyway, continuing with this discussion, the planets were also an independent, although a later discovery bordering on the Vedic time. They are mentioned for the first time perhaps in the Taittiriya Aranyak. The laws of Manu, however, are silent, but their worship is inculcated in the later code of Yagyavalk. At any rate, completed in the age long subsequent to the Vedas. The zodiac signs or Jyotisha or so called Vedic calendar with the celestial points referring to 1181 BC or to a period still more remote seems to have been constructed or at any rate completed in an age long subsequent to the Vedas. 1181 BC, long before long subsequent to the Vedas. Means all these calculations, if they are made in the second millennia BCA, and Vedas are much before that, obviously, the dating of Vedas, they have to think afresh. The second period of Brahman astronomy dates from the Greek and Greco-Bactrian invasions of India during the 3rd century before Christ. In some points, the Brahmins made advances beyond the Greek astronomy. Their fame spread to turn throughout the West and found entrance into the chronicle. Pascal commenced about 339 AD, revised under Heraclius 610 to 641 AD. In the 8th and 9th centuries, the Arabs became their disciples, borrowed the lunar mention in the revised order from Hindus, translated the Sanskrit astronomical treatise Siddhantas under the name of Sindhans. Brahmin astronomers of 6th century, Varahamihira, was followed by a famous sage Brahmagupta in the 7th, 664 AD, and by a succession of distinguished workers ending with Bhaskara in the 12th century, 1150 AD. The terminology is old. We call it CA now, but because the books are old, see, they continue with that. And interesting thing is that the algebra and arithmetic, the Brahmins attained to a high degree of proficiency independent of Western aid. To them we owe the invention of numerical symbols or the decimal system, the Indian figures 1 to 9 being abbreviated form of the initial letters of the numerals themselves. We have to talk about these numerals because in astronomy figures and digits are important. But that can be covered in a separate video. Then finally for today we have the last book by Elphinstone, 1874, almost 170 years. The antiquity and the originality of the Indian astronomy form subject of considerable interest. Cassini, Bailey, and Playfair maintain that the observations taken upwards of 3000 years before Christ are still extant and prove a considerable degree of progress already made at that period. All astronomers, however, admit that the Greek and great antiquity of the Hindus. Quite a lot of details are given by Elphinstone, but the basic objective has been that he has talked about the yugas, then divisions, then further divisions, then further divisions. But quite significantly, the best thing about again geometry is the ratio of the diameter to the circumference is given in the Surya Siddhant. Now, Surya Siddhant is one book where what Shakespeare said, what is there in a name? And below wrote his name, Shakespeare. But the author of Surya Siddhant, such a great man that he has not given his name. And still a lot of debate is there about when Surya Siddhant was written. Some people say, particularly the Westerns, that it was around 500 CA, around the time of, some say it is because of the Brahmadatta, others say it is Aryabhatta or something like that. But Aryabhatta, whenever he has written his name, like Aryabhatta and other things that we will talk about later. And even by Bentley's account in the 11th century, the demonstration हो गया. Their application of algebra to the astronomical investigations and geometric demonstrations is also an invention of their own, and the manner of conducting it is even now entitled to admiration. Colebrook has talked about this. And Colebrook has given quite exhaustive details about the astronomy in India. It is quite voluminous, and that we will cover in our next discussion. Hopefully, we will finish our discussion in the next video, or maybe we may require another one. Thank you.